Hey, insiders. What do hit artists such as Barbra Streisand, Philip Bailey, Phil Collins, and Earth, Wind & Fire all have in common? Hit songwriter Roxanne Seeman of Noah Noah Music. We discuss the vast opportunities available to songwriters outside the United States, as well as what specific actionable steps you need to be taking as a writer to help your career, and much, much more. Coming right up. I managed to catch up with my dear friend, Roxanne Seeman. Roxy, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Pleasure.
Listen, I want to ask you, you've had a very artistic career throughout your life. You worked in the arts a lot, in film, in music. I'm curious, do you remember a time in your life, or was there a time that you're conscious of when you made a decision that the arts, or more specifically music, was going to be your career path?
I was always interested in music. I can't say there's a specific time.
Okay.
But I always loved it. But I also loved art, and I loved fine art. And I painted, and I did things like that as well.
Right.
I like languages. So when I went to school in Pittsburgh for a year and a half, actually, I wanted to learn calligraphy because I wanted to draw the character.
Okay.
I ended up learning language because there was no calligraphy class.
Okay.
Well, then I transferred to Columbia University. I took a course. I was a major in Chinese arts and language, Oriental studies, but I took a Chinese music class there. But I also was taking piano lessons, and I had friends in bands, and I booked bands. I booked bands through college activities at Carnegie Mellon University and at Columbia. So I was always involved in music. I mean, even when I was a kid, in junior high school, I would have friends over play in the basement of my parents' house.
Do you remember when you started writing professionally?
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I was a real jazz freak. I loved all the jazz instrumentals and Creed Taylor artists. And I actually hitched from Pittsburgh to Cleveland to a CTI All-Stars concert.
Okay.
I met, after the show, I saw some other people go up onto the stage. And I thought, well, if they're doing it, I'm going to go up there. And I met Hubert Laws. And I asked him if he ever plays in New York. And he gave me a number. And he said, when you get to New York, call this number and they will tell you when I'm playing. So when I got to New York, I called. And the voice on the other end of the phone said, "Is this the little girl from Pittsburgh?" And it was him. And he took me to a session which was incredible at Rudy Van Gelder's in New Jersey. It was amazing session. Bobby Hutcherson, and it was just an incredible. He was playing on it. And then I had a summer off. I was actually I had worked at Atlantic Records. I was floating around. This is after college. I'd go through the different departments. And then I decided I wanted to move to California. And when that summer I took off, I was listening to all these instrumentals, and I started hearing lyrics to a Ronnie Laws song. So I went to Hubert, who I would play tennis with at this point. I said, I have some ideas for lyrics for Ronnie's song. He said, finish it, and when I go to California, I'll give it to him. So I ended up moving to California, and I got a job at ABC Records. And as part of that job, even though it wasn't the area that I wanted to be in, which was originally going to be international, but they were selling the company. So by the time I got there, there was a moratorium on hiring. I ended up working in the legal department. I was doing licensing. But the head of the legal department, Don Biederman, was a fantastic person, was also the head of administration, which included the studio. And he approved the 2-hour, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. free studio time. So I would hang out over there, and I would do my demos over there by taking these instrumentals, passing them on to 2-inch tape. And I had all these singer friends, David Lasley, Arnold McCullough, and they were touring with James Taylor, and they would come and show up at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I would take the instrumentals, which is what I did actually with the Ronnie Laws record, Wayne Henderson had a lockout in Studio C. And Reggie Dozier, which is Lamont's brother, was his engineer. And I would go in there and I kept saying, I wrote lyrics to Ronnie's song and you publish it. I just need 1 hour of your time, of Reggie's time. And he did it. I mean, he gave me the time and I made that. And then from there, the engineers, all the second engineers at ABC wanted to record my demo because I brought in great singers.
Great.
So I did this while I was working at the label, and you could walk right through to the studio. It was really great. And from there, I just started writing lyrics to some different songs. Sometimes I didn't even know the composer.
Great.
But one of them was Larry Dunn's Tequila Mocking, which was an instrumental that he wrote and produced for Ramsey Lewis. So I wrote lyrics for that, and I knew that Ronnie and he were good friends. So I called Ronnie and said, well, I've written lyrics for Larry's song. And he says, I'll give it to Larry. Well, I kept calling, and finally Ronnie's wife, Carmen, said, Roxy, here's Larry's number. You call Larry. And I called Larry, and I told him I've written lyrics for your song, and I'm a friend of Ronnie Laws, and he told me I could call you, and he said, who's cutting it? And I said, don't you want to hear it? He said, get it cut. He was a really funny guy. Well, anyway, he and I became friends, and he would invite me to some of his sessions, which is how I ended up meeting Philip Bailey. 1 year later, he called me. He said, where is that tape that you made of Tequila Mockingbird? I'm working with Dee Dee Bridgewater. So anyway, he recorded the song with Dee Dee Bridgewater, with George Duke producing, and that was my first record.
And that's how it all got started for you.
That's how it got started. And my first credit was writing a song with Larry Dunn. That's my first record with Dee Dee Bridgewater on Elektra Records, produced by George Duke.
That's fantastic.
And then, and at this point, Larry had been inviting me to his sessions, and he had been doing some sessions with Philip Bailey. And one day I got a call from Philip Bailey, want to write a song for The Fire with me. And that became Sail Away.
Right. Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's right.
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Okay. So your career just sort of took off as a result of these various relationships.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, you've been writing for a while and you've been in music publishing for a while. Talk to me how the game of songwriting or the landscape of it today has changed for you.
Well, it used to be because I was hanging out in these studios with all these guys, and I would meet one and the other, and then they would exchange music and things like that. So that's how I met a lot of them. I met Jermaine Jackson in the studio at ABC, and he called me to do something. I mean, it was really a lot of fun those days. And, it was live sessions, live musician.
Right.
So it was really a community, as opposed to now where everyone's writing out of their homes.
Right. So isn't that gathering of, the community in the studio, the guitar, bass, drums, singers, together? It's everybody working on their own.
No, I mean, I used to go to the complex and hang out there, and then you not only met you met everybody. I mean, you met the engineers, the producers, the artists, other writers. I mean, it was really a lot of fun.
That is interesting. It reminds me of the contrast that people talk about today with the absence of record stores. That one of the things that record stores in the past, whether it was Tower or, any others, provided was that sense of community. In the same way you're describing the recording studio as being that sense of community among players and writers and singers and producers and engineers as a community in terms of working together. And it seems like a lot of your relationships professionally were built on that community of meeting those people and being in that environment, which is so totally different today. One thing I want to talk to you about, which I find very interesting and distinct to your career, is you have been very, very active in the international market and in working with international artists. And I'm wondering, how did that start for you? Because so many people tend to focus on just what's in front of them here at home, but you literally work with people around the world. Can you talk about that?
I've always been interested in the international arena. And I've traveled a lot. And I was going to start my first job on the record, out in LA, international at ABC Records. I mean, that's really what I thought I wanted to do.
Right.
Until I got involved in writing. Then I started traveling. I'm thinking my partner, Billy Hughes, and I like to travel to Japan.
Okay.
And when I met him, we started writing. We wrote a couple of songs, and he went over to Japan for 4 months, and he played in a club in Osaka.
Okay.
And when he came back, and I had gone to China, actually, on just a pleasure trip. And that was right before he went to Japan. Actually, it was right before we met. And then we met. We wrote a couple of songs, and he went to Japan, came back. We started writing again, and we got some equipment together. And he handed me a track, and he said, write me something Chinese. And because I had been to China and I had walked on the Chinese wall, after a while, I took a couple months to think about it. I wrote a song called Walking on the Chinese Wall.
Right.
It became a big hit for us.
Yes. And it was the title track of Philip's album.
That was the title track of Philip's album. And from there, we went together to Brazil. That was a big trip for us. And then it exposed us to some fantastic music in Brazil, but we also made meetings down there. We met with different publishers from each day. It was actually an experience to meet each day with a different publisher from a different company.
So from Brazil, you met some publishers, and how did that progress from there?
So each day I remember, we traveled around. We had a fantastic time. We actually went to Club Med in Itaparica, came back. Well, actually, there was a lady that worked for Quincy Jones. Her name was Louise Velasquez, and she asked me to bring some things down there for Yvonne Linds's manager, and she also introduced me to Javon's manager. So we went to some, and they happened to have each of them a show that week. So we had this adventure because one of the shows was outside in the jungles outside of Rio, which was tremendous. And one was at a place called Canecao. And then we met with publisher from EMI. And we met with our publisher at the time was at Warner Chappell. And we met with someone from Sony. And each lunch or thing that we did with each publisher was a fantastic experience, seeing something different.
Right.
Because they each took us to a different place in Brazil. And the way that turned into something, over the years, I kept in touch with everybody. And so that was in 85. But in 1991, I went to MUBUTV. Was it 91 or 92? It was a year after the Gulf War. I went to Cannes to MUBUTV. It was my first MUBUTV. And I met Eileen Schneider there. She invited me for dinner. And we had become friendly from my trip to Brazil, which I went to again. She, 2 months later, sent me a package. And she asked me, it was 2 songs, and they were from the EMI catalog. And she asked if I would write English lyrics for them because she wanted to exploit them internationally. There was no artist in mind. There was no target for them. She just was hoping that I would write an English version.
Right.
And I did.
Okay.
I took my time with it, on and off, and the next year I saw her again, and I showed up with demos for these songs. Beautiful demos. 5 years later, one of those songs was recorded by Barbra Streisand.
Wow. That's sort of a circuitous way on the international front to have it come home.
Yeah. Well, now, in the meantime, Billy and I started traveling back to Japan. He loved Japan. I loved Asia, too. We started going to Japan. We made a sub-publishing deal with a company called Fuji Pacific, who are the strongest domestic company in Japan.
Right.
And we started every year or every couple of years or so going to Japan, and we kept up with them. And I kept saying I would like to have my songs recorded in Japanese. And we would go. At the time, there was no internet at the time. And we would show up and have meetings in the lobby of the hotel, and I would be introduced to people. They would Japanese people in the business, but they didn't speak English. We didn't speak Japanese.
Right.
I'm good with languages. I mean, and then there's always just a way to communicate. People can communicate if you want to do something together. You can do it. And they would come, and I would sort of explain. I would like to work together. And after a while, we started getting our songs recorded in Japanese.
Wonderful.
A very funny thing happened. We had written a song that was really meant for a American television show. And we sent it to Japan, and they told us it was suitable for an artist called Wink, which is two 17-year-old boys, a duo. And it had Billy Seeman on it. And it didn't get cut right away. And after a few months, I had a female singer sing it. So it had a lighter vocal, and right away the girls recorded that song. It sold about 400,000 copies.
Wow.
In the meantime, the song got in the TV show here, and it became a love thing and a soap opera. And I now had this new version of the Japanese girls, and the music, it was actually our co-writer, the composer, and the director of the show said, "Do you think the Japanese girls will sing it in English?" Well, they weren't interested. They weren't even going to ask the girls if they would do it in English. So I said to Bill, why don't we do this? We'll take the arrangement, the same arrangement. I'll have it, programmed here, and you'll sing the vocals.
Okay.
Well, I did that. So they told me at Fuji Pacific, send it back to us. Maybe we can get you a cover in English. The long story short is they ended up proposing it for a TV show that wanted an international song with Bill in it. We get the word that our song is going to appear in the show. Within a very short month or so, the song was released. It sold 520,000 singles, and it became the #1 international single of the year with Billy as the artist.
And you've also had hits in China as well.
Yes. I work with the producer of Jackie Chung, and with Jackie Chung directly. He's China's #1 pop icon.
Right.
He's fantastic. And he decided he wanted to make a jazz record. So it's called Private Corner. He coined the phrase canto jazz, and I wrote half of that album for him and worked very close with his producer and him back and forth between LA, Hong Kong, and Europe, because I was writing with all European writers from Scandinavia and Germany.
For that album?
For the album, starting with the German corner in LA, where we wrote the first song, and they were very happy with that. So they kept asking me for more songs.
Okay. Let me ask you, in terms of talking about your writing process, do you feel today, in terms of your own work, that it's important to write with the artist? Or has that not been something that's that important, do you think?
I like to do that. I do that with Philip Bailey, and that's my partner, Billy Hughes, was the artist on our songs.
Okay.
So I've done a lot of that. I've been asked for lyrics. I love to work with great singers, so I've had singers ask me for lyrics or write with me for their records, or sometimes, or sometimes if it's an English version for a foreign artist, I've done that.
Okay. I want to ask you a personal question in terms of your professional life. Can you identify, or has there ever been a book or movie that you have found particularly inspiring creatively for yourself as an artist?
I drew a lot of my inspiration from books.
From books, okay.
Yeah, from writing.
Any that come to mind?
Well, I'll tell you a few things. For the song Walking on the Chinese Wall, because I was trying to come up with things that are, Chinese or symbolic or references, there's a book called The Dream of the Red Chamber, a famous novel.
Okay.
17th century China. And I referred to it in the bridge. And then there's the I Ching, which is the Book of Changes. And that's also in the lyric. Butterfly, spread your painted wings for an answer from the chain. But you don't have to really know these hooks to appreciate the lyrics. It's very poetic. For another song, I used a line out of the Dostoevsky book.
Do you remember which book?
Yeah, The Brothers Karamazov.
Okay. Not bad. That's a classic.
Yeah. Something like, what is, I don't remember exactly what it was. What is pleasure without suffering? Something like that. Life would be an endless church service. It would be holy, but tedious.
Right. From Dostoevsky.
Mm-hmm.
What about films for you? Have you ever been inspired by films or?
Yeah, actually, I wrote a song called Which Way, Robert Frost.
Okay.
After seeing the movie Up, the Disney movie Up. And that was a combination of Robert Frost's The Road Less Traveled and Up. And I had a Chinese student who was taking a philosophy class, and she was asking me about philosophy. So we were talking a lot about that at the time. And she was studying engineering, recording engineering. So she actually was engineering my vocal guide for the song that I was writing with my partner, who had now returned to Berlin. So that lyric is full of all of that.
Some really insightful and useful information coming from Roxanne, especially for you songwriters who are interested in finding additional markets around the world for your music. So, insiders, here's the question of the day. What were the most enlightening aspects of our conversation with Roxanne regarding outlets for your music? Was it the opportunities that are available to you as a songwriter outside of the United States? Or was it the actionable steps you as a songwriter need to be taking now to develop your career? Or maybe it was something else that connected with you. If you have any ideas or experiences that you'd like to share regarding this video, we'd love to hear from you and connect in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe to MUBUTV for more information on how to educate, empower, and engage your music career. You can also check out a summary of this episode, everything we talked about, in the YouTube description as well. And if you enjoyed this video, we'd really love it if you hit the like button and let us know what other kinds of videos and types of content you'd be interested in seeing on our channel. Hit us up in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.